We continue the shir in Sichos HaRan, sayings of Rabbi Arizal, Sif Kuf Mem test that we've been on for the past number of shiurim. This paragraph 149 deals with the story of the Zion Bettlers. The last story is Tikuney Zohar. We have completed telling that story, and now to get back to Rabbi Nosson's describing the story behind the story. What transpired when Rabbi Arizal told this story, under what conditions he told this story, and the items that led up to his relating this story. Nosson tells us that this story was not told at one sitting. It wasn't told at one time. It took a number of days Rabbi Arizal to complete this story. Each time, what led up to the telling of that part of the story was something that happened or some kind of a discussion that dealt with an item that was related to the continuation of the story. This is what led Rabbi Arizal to continue of this story. It all began on Erev Shabbos Kodesh on a Friday night, Rabbi Arizal's home, approximately 7 months before Rabbi Arizal's Histalkus, which in itself is a hint at the depth and holiness of the story, because the closer Rabbi Arizal came to Histalkus, that's how much greater Rabbi Arizal was. Remember, Rabbi Arizal said that in his later years, he could accomplish in 15 minutes what it took him a whole lifetime to accomplish till then. So at that time, imagine what Rabbi Arizal's madrega was then. It's difficult to conceive, to even think of it, so awesome. And it was then that Rabbi Arizal told this story. At that moment, in Rabbi Arizal's home at the table, there was mention made of a letter that Rabbi Nosson had written to a friend of his. Nosson mentioned in this letter the words, as a good Breslov does, to be b'simcha. Always be b'simcha. Rabbi Arizal reflected on this for a moment, and he said to those around him, Rabbi Nosson was not there at the time. He said to those around him, what do you know about how to be b'simcha in the middle of a sadness, in the middle of a dejection? The person feels in a very sad frame of mind. How to become b'simcha right in the middle of that sad frame of mind, in the middle of a sad moment. Rabbi Arizal said, I'll tell you how to be b'simcha. And then he began this story. He told the beginning of the story. You recall that part of the story dealing with the prince who took over the kingdom during his father's lifetime, that part of the story that was not completed. And then he also told the story of the beginning of the part of the 7 bettlers. He completed the first day. The bettler of the first day, the blind bettler, and how the blind bettler related his greatness, how he lived special long life compared to the stories of the wise men. Each one told about his length of life. He could recall, his memory could recall that far back. Now the blind bettler showed his superiority over them. That was the end of the first day. That's as far as Rabbi Arizal told that night. On Tuesday, Rabbi Naftali Zal, Rabbi Nosson's closest chava, came and told Rabbi Nosson this story that Rabbi Arizal had told, this part of the story, which in itself is a full story. Nosson writes that he was astounded, completely astounded, amazed at what he heard. Because though he had heard from Rabbi Arizal many discussions before, many deep shiurim, many stories also, Tikuney Zohar, Rabbi Nosson was a maven and understood this was far superior, it superseded anything he'd ever heard before. He was so taken aback by this, he couldn't wait to both speak to Rabbi Arizal about this part of the story, and also, anxiously, to hear the rest of the story. The next morning, on Wednesday morning, Nosson came to Rabbi Arizal's home. He spoke to Rabbi Arizal, and Rabbi Arizal told him, reviewed with him, the discussions about the wise men, about their memory, which each one recalled, He also clarified certain points. The story we have now is in perfect detail. Arizal got this from the Arizal himself. He made clear those points, the exact order of these wise men who spoke about their memory. Arizal also told Arizal about the words of the blind bettler, who said, I recall whatever you recall. I can recall way back to the time when, before the fruit even came to the tree, the color, the taste, the smell of the fruit, so forth, even before the birth of the child, before the child was even formed, before the child was even conceived. I recall way back there. I also recall nothing. I recall nothing means when there was absolutely nothing. To be able to recall that which before time, this was the power of this blind bettler. This Arizal explained to the Arizal. Imagine that zechus, to be able to hear that. And so, in the middle of this discussion, Arizal was very anxious to hear further. Suddenly, Arizal's Mishoris by Kodesh, the one who served the Arizal personally, came. He set the table for the Arizal to eat. Arizal was forced to leave temporarily while the Arizal ate. These short phrases are important for us to know exactly how the relationship at that time was, what the derech was. Arizal had to eat. We now know definitely from Arizal's words that it was not respectful for anyone to be present. Arizal walked out at the time, even though it would seem that to be present there, what damage, what harm could it do? Yet it was customary then to walk out. Though, as we know that on Friday night, the main time for the Arizal's shiurim, Friday night and Shabbos, they ate together at the table. During the week, apparently, it was the rule that he would eat by himself. After he ate, a very small amount naturally, what we would call a tiny snack. After Arizal ate that, he lay down for a short nap. Again, of course, Arizal's nap was the same type of nap as the Ariyah Kodesh would take. Arizal went to visit the heavens, the yeshivas in heaven, and to receive the order, the lights of the Torah that is found, that is studied in heaven. After this short nap, Arizal re-entered. He came back, and again he continued his discussion with Arizal. He said to Arizal, told him what a pity, how the whole world is so filled with daigas, with different types of worries, concerns, a lack of a happy frame of mind. So Arizal said, that's exactly the part of the story we're up to. The world is filled with daigas. They don't live a good life. That's the story of the second bettler. So Arizal told the story of the second bettler, who lived the good life, a very good life. That was on that Wednesday. So Arizal heard this personally, the story of the second bettler. Then, on Friday night, the following Friday night, Arizal told the story of the third and fourth bettler. Third is the bettler who had difficulty in speech, dumb, could not speak. And the fourth one was the one whose throat was out of joint, crooked throat. Of course, as we see in the story, these were actually spiritual talents. No one had a better power of speech than the third bettler. No one's throat was more perfect than the fourth bettler, just that these were seeming defects. The bettlers proved that they were really very great tzaddikim, the greatest tzaddikim, and these were signs of their greatness, their holiness. And of course, again, we make note again and again that these bettlers were really one person. The tzaddik emes, all seven qualities of the tzaddik emes, the only one who could know about this is the person himself, the bettler himself, the tzaddik emes himself. So therefore, the one that told this story must have been, and was, and is, the 7 Betlers combined into one. Arizal is the 7 Betlers. Now, in telling that story of the 3rd and 4th Betler, this came about in a strange manner too. Because that Friday night, it was customary that Arizal would sit at the table, and the people would sit around, they would eat together, Arizal would speak to Bnei Torah. That night he was sitting at the table, he was filled with sadness, tears, tragedy. He was sitting there feeling very sad, very pained about the fact that the Arizal's daughter, Udal, who had a son, infant, this infant was very, very ill. In those days, war in general, of course, as is known by the tzadikim, we find that the great Noshim Tikuney either were barren, they did not have children, or they had tzadik gidul bonim. They suffered very much in raising the children. Children that were born did not live. This is because they had to carry the burden, the sins of all the people, so they suffered for all of them. The tefillahs had to cover for all of them. Arizal's daughter had already had a few children, daughters that had passed away. Were born, and they died very shortly afterwards. Now she had this son who was very ill. Arizal sat at the table very sadly, very filled with sorrow and pain over the fact that his grandson was so ill. Of course, this was at that Friday night. Just a week later, as is known, this infant passed away too. Ultimately, and that's why, of course, Arizal was so sad, because obviously he could see the future. He knew that there was no way to save this child. Why it had to be so, that's a mystery. Arizal once spoke about his own 2 sons. Arizal had 2 sons also that were born, who died in their infancy. And this is one of the mysteries too. Arizal spoke about the fact that the Aliyah Kodesh had children, sons also that died. The reason they died was because Arizal revealed certain secrets of Kabbalah. He revealed these secrets, therefore he was punished by having his children die. The question is, why not avoid revealing it? Keep it to yourself. What's so hard about not revealing it? The answer is that Arizal came to this world with that mission. He came to this world, his mission was to reveal those secrets. Because he revealed them, his children had to die. It's a quandary, a dilemma, a paradoxical case to which there is no solution. Do not reveal it, you're not fulfilling your mission. Reveal it, your children have to die. This was the Arizal's dilemma too. There is no explaining, we cannot understand the mysterious, unknown, unfathomable rules of heaven. Yet these are the rules which tzaddikim live by. So here Arizal apparently, obviously knew that this child was destined to die in just a few days, so he sat there very sadly at the table. Ultimately, though, Arizal's daughter Udal did have a son and daughter that lived. In fact, her son, Rav of Breslov, was one of the great followers of Rav Nosson during the Yemei HaTlois, the most trying times, when very few proved themselves true loyal students. He was one of those. That was his kedusha, Tzedekah's Udal's son. Meanwhile, sitting at the table, in such a sad frame of mind, Arizal ate without speaking, and then they benched. They benched immediately, the people there, and Arizal sat there a little while longer, and while he sat at the table, he suddenly began to speak a discussion, a topic, a shir, relating to this grandchild of his. Apparently a very deep topic about how the heart can take just so much and how the heart suffers, the pain, the sorrow. A very deep topic. And from that, suddenly, Rabbi Nachman said, where are we in that story of the Zion Bettlers? He began to tell the story of the third bettler and then the story of the fourth bettler. He completed the story of the fourth bettler. He got up and walked out of the room. Rabbi Rosenfeld tells us, this is another amazing point, very strong point to consider, to think of, because these type of statements generally go lost. These are treasures that should not be lost. Rosenfeld says that in his mind was racing, striving, searching, delving, with the greatest tension, greatest concentration possible to remember every word that Rabbi Nachman said, to retain. His memory should retain every single word that was said, because he knew that every word of the story, each word, was so great it was like the whole Sefer Torah. Contained all these secrets of Kabbalah and all the Gemara's Benigla Benista. So he strove very hard to concentrate and retain the words of these two parts of the story. Rabbi Rosenfeld writes that because he worked so hard in retaining the story, there slipped out of his mind the shiur Rabbi Nachman gave prior to the story. He could not recall what Rabbi Nachman spoke about before this, in reference to the child. There was a whole shiur before that. Then afterwards he told the story. In order to keep the story, Nachman forgot that shiur. He forgot it, he lost it completely. He writes that without not being ashamed to admit it. He admits the fact that my memory failed me. I could not bring back, and for some reason, apparently he could not get it from others either. The others too had forgotten it. Whatever reason it was, the fact is that Nachman says he could not bring back that shiur that was spoken, and it's lost. Chaval al the it's a pity on that which went lost, could not be retrieved, but it did go lost. I could not remember it. If Nachman could say, Nachman the Goyim and Tzadik Goyim could say, he could say that I forgot, I don't recall, then surely we can understand that the power of forgetting can happen to any person without having to accuse or condemn or belittle, demean that person. The biggest Rosh Hashiva, the biggest Goyin, could forget too. It doesn't make him worth any less. Doesn't mean that he doesn't have a mind or a brain, Chas v'sholom. This is apparently the reason the Nosson writes this, to know that if a person does forget part of what he learned, do not feel depressed, do not feel sad, because this could happen, it does happen. A person's mind is not perfect. Great tzaddikim in the past, the Gemara says the Tanoim had minds that retained. Whatever he poured in, stayed. Of course, these stories too are told about later tzaddikim, and naturally believe that Moshe had the same kind of a mind. The Moshe learned, remained. You can see from Moshe's photo that there's no corner, no remotest corner of the Torah that he wasn't fully acquainted with. So comparing minds, and Moshe's mind was surely the top of the list, above all the Gedolim, the Gedolim, and B'nai Torah, certainly. But even the Gedolim, they forget. We know that you have Shivrei Luchos. Luchos were very holy. The broken Luchos, the letters were missing, they too were placed in the Holy Ark. Because if a person is old Luchos, the old ones, not the new ones, old ones that had no letters, the letters were gone, which means a Zaki, an old person with the letters, the knowledge is gone from him, he forgot, receives the same credit, is considered the same holy as the new ones. This statement is very vital for us to keep in mind always. To know that it is possible for any person to chas v'sholom forget, but he must at least strive, work very hard in remembering and retaining as much as is his ability. This was on Friday night. The following Sunday, Rabbi Nachman told the story of the fifth bettler who seemed to have a hunchback, who was hunched. And on Tuesday, Rabbi Nachman told the story of the sixth Betla. Sixth Betla, the main one, the Betla who had hands that were deformed, without hands. Then, one of the Menachem Talmidim told a story about a certain item. The Menachem said, why, that's the story of the seventh Betla that relates to that story. He was about to tell it, but something happened, and they were interrupted, and the Menachem did not finish it. He did not go on to that, and the Menachem said, this means that you will never be able to hear the end of the story. The story of the seventh Betla, or the tie-in with the beginning of the story. Menachem said later on that you will not be able to hear it until Mashiach comes. When Mashiach comes, the story will be completed. Now, obviously, this means that the completion of the seventh Betla relates to the coming of Mashiach. So then it's fit to tell that story relating to the coming of Mashiach's coming, the actual coming of Mashiach. We'll be able to see, to feel, to understand, and to participate in the story of the seventh Betla. We should be zecher to be able to see that. We should be part of that. Those words were, you will not be zecher to hear this till Mashiach comes. Fine, we're ready to hear it now. We await the telling of the seventh Betla. Arizal says now, as a rule, general rule, as we stated before, that every story Arizal told required an isarusa de l'sata, required something to bring out that story, something from below. These stories obviously are the li'ela. They are very heavenly, they're very high, they're very exalted. They cannot come down by themselves. There must be something to bring them down. There was always the telling of a story, of the relating of an incident. Generally, it was something to do with current events. Something like current events that was told in the Menachel's presence. The Menachem said, now, once you mention that, this releases the chance to speak about this heavenly story. So always, that's what led to the telling of these stories. If not, this most important of all stories. Menachem once said, he once made this statement in relation to the story, that one of the tales, Menachem speaks about the mitzvah of giving tzedakah to the tzadik. He said it's like a person who plants a seed in the ground. You plant a seed, that seed is edible. You can eat that. You can give it to your animals to eat. You're taking good food, you're putting it into the ground, that seed is going to rot. It's going to spoil. You're sacrificing an edible piece of food. But if you plant it in fertile ground, in fertile soil, that's going to produce a lot. Rich soil produce a whole crop of vegetation, of food will come from that one little seed. That is the case of giving tzedakah to the tzadik. You're planting in fertile soil. You give this tiny little drop, this drop of money, whatever it is very small, put it into the hand of the tzaddik, it takes root, and you receive tremendous dividends. You can plant one single seed, you can have a whole tree come out with thousands and thousands of times as much as that seed contained. And that's the same as giving tzedakah to the tzaddik. You plant that one little drop, give that little bit of tzedakah, you get back so much wealth from the schus of that tzedakah. Menachem once said that when a person gives me tzedakah, he thinks that he is giving. With me, when one gives, it's not like you give anywhere else. When you give, you take. When one gives me, when I receive, I am actually giving, not receiving. Physically, it looks like I'm receiving something, but actually, I'm giving. And this, of course, related to the story the sixth Betla told about these wise men, these Chachamim, tzaddikim were discussing about their power of their hands, what they can do with their hands. One of them said he has the power that when he receives, he's actually giving. The Betla said this refers, of course, to tzedakah. Menachem once said, I have that power This was a passing remark that, in other words, whatever case you'll find in the story of the seven Betlers, that's myself, I have that power. It happened to come up at that moment, the story of Stucca, so the Arizal was there as the one who has this koyach. Also, the Arizal once said that it would be much better, for the sake of all, if I told this story, in fact, all these stories, putting Mysius, better if I told these stories without showing anything openly, any hint or any sign of Kedusha in these stories. It's just a plain folklore, a story told by people, a tale, just tales being told, because then it would bring out the purest degree of emunah in those who would read it. You read a story, you see no Kedusha in it at all, you have to have pure faith. For instance, the case of all the Sforim in the Torah Kedusha itself. When you learn the Reishis, it's this whole sefer filled with Musa. You learn about Avraham Avinu, Levita Eshel, he was at Machnas Eidach, his tremendous amount of Mesiras Nefesh, the tests he passed, sacrificing his son, Yitzhak Avinu going through the Nisyonis, Yaakov Avinu going through so many tests with his battles, and Hashem spoke to him. There's a lot of Musa there. The story of Yosef at tzadik, this was a person with a desire, emulate them. And then on Shmeis, Moshe Rabbeinu, all the Musa, the Seres HaDibrais, the Torah being given, the mitzvahs of the Torah. And as you go along, you find throughout the rest of the Torah, Yeshua, the Sheftim, Shmuel Hanavi, Lochem, all filled with Musa. All lessons that each Jew should know. But you get the one sefer, Shira Shidim, what do you find there? You look for a word of Musa, you can't find it. And Shira Shidim, where you find no Musa, you don't find the word, the name of Hashem even, that is Kodesh Kodeshim, Holy of Holies. Because that contains the secret depth of all the holy names of Hashem, all the heavenly words, Kabbalah. Menachem said that would have been nice if he would have left this, he put in Mysius as hidden as that. Completely hidden, to have no trace, no sign of Musar, open holiness in them, that people would have to have the same degree of Emunah. Pure Emunah, they're learning something that is above all the others for them, in Kedusha, and to believe the Pshitas. However, the Arizal felt that it would be better if he would reveal at least a little bit, once in a while, a little bit Kedusha in them, a little bit depth, that people should know, rather than just the Emunah alone. To know there is something very deep. There are Seidas, secrets hidden in these stories. We see this, of course, Bien. Arizal speaks about the tzadikim and the Zion Betlers, the power of these tzadikim, the fact that you have 4 levels, 10 degrees. You can see this speaking about the Sfidos, the Elamais. We don't understand much about it, but we see that there is not an ordinary tale there. There is something that's filled with Kedusha. Because I wanted this, that those who are not that perfect in the Emunah should at least know there is something deep in this. There are secrets of Torah that, coupled with the Emunah, you have some Yediyah or to reinforce your Emunah. This is the story behind the story of the Zion Betlers. Now we come back to Sichos HaRan, back to the sayings of the Arizal. The Arizal once spoke about a topic that is mentioned at length in Tikuney Zohar. It's sort of a mysterious topic, unknown topic, which is revealed to a degree by the Arizal. You know that every person, all people, seem to be born alike. Everyone has the same number of organs, the same type of body, the same type of functions. Of course, the minds are different, the heart, the will, the goodness, the evil. Each person can select whichever path he wants. But yet, some are born with a greater degree of talent than others. There are ones who have ishleinos, abilities that others don't have. Some are even born, chas v'shalom, deformed. There are some infants born with deformities, chas v'shalom. But these are cases of abnormalities. These are known to be exceptions to the normal. It's not the normal case. There is one item that is strange. Question of why it should be so. The case of something which is normal and yet is different. It's accepted as normal and yet is different. And why it should be so. Why are there some people who are born with a tendency to be left-handed instead of right-handed? What makes a person left-handed? We say left, it means wrong. It would seem it's wrong-handed. You have the right hand, the right, proper hand, and the wrong, or the left hand. In fact, in Hebrew, it's called iter yad yaminai. A left hand, there's no word left-handed. A left-handed person is called one whose right hand is tied up. It's locked. His right hand is locked. He cannot use it too freely, and he's forced to use his left hand. What is the secret behind this item, left-handedness? Why is a person born left-handed? And also, of course, would it be advisable for a person to try to overcome this? Is it something to overcome, or should he accept it? There are people who are left-handed, and physically, you can have a southpaw pitcher, baseball, who is the best pitcher in the, whatever it is, the leagues. Whatever you call those things. Be the best pitcher out, though he is left-handed. It does not make him inferior. The same type of work, but you can have a person who lifts weights. He's left-handed, he can lift more weights with his left hand, he's more powerful than the strongest person who is right-handed. So we see that it's not a physical defect. It's just a different type of nature. His nature is that he has more power with his left than the right. Of course, there is also right-footed and left-footed too. To us, we don't notice these things because it never comes into play. But there are certain mitzvahs in the Torah where it makes a very big difference, where it's very vital to know which foot does a person favor, which foot is stronger, which one it leads. There are different ways of detecting it that are told in the Shulchan. But generally what we do see is a difference between a right and left hand. A right-handed person and an ite yad yaminai, a left-handed one. Arizal says that what makes a person be born left-handed, not because something that the parents did. The mother might have seen something and she was frightened and she moved to the left, sharp left turn, and this way gave the child left-handed preference. It is not due to the parents. It is due to the parent, meaning the person himself. Person himself, in a prior life, his former Gilgul, before he was reincarnated, what he did during that lifetime will determine whether he comes back, whether he's reborn right-handed or left-handed. This is what determines left-handedness. Arizal says we can see this, a hint to this, in the Torah. We find that Kaidach, who was the leader of the tribe, one of the leaders of the tribe, and who was a Pikeach, who was very wise, very learned, a big Talmud Chacham, a leader, yet he came out and rebelled against Moshe Rabbeinu and Aharon. He rebelled. He had all he covered in honor and greatness in the world, and wisdom, but he said he wanted to be the Kohen Gadol. He was a Levi. He wanted the kahuna. He was jealous of Moshe Rabbeinu being the king, Aharon HaKohen being the Kohen Gadol. So he said he wants to take over to be the Kohen Gadol. Why should Aharon HaKohen be Kohen Gadol? This was his rebellion. Arizal says from this story we could see just a hint It is fact. This is only a hint to show. Fact, the Rabbeinu says that a person who committed a certain misdeed during his lifetime, but he's not punished for it now. He is punished for it in a future Gilgul. When he is reborn, he is given a sign to show what he had done wrong in the former Gilgul. If he was a Baal Machlekes, one who instigates, who causes friction, who causes disharmony, battle and controversy, he causes controversy, he rebels, causes a battle or any kind of friction in a group, or he rebels against his superiors, Machlekes Mulchama, then when he is reborn as a left-handed person. This, again, we see this from the fact that Kaidach, what was Kaidach's crime? Machlekes, Mulchama, rebelling against Moshe Rabbeinu Adonai. What did he want? What was related with this Machlekes? He wanted to switch. He was a Levi. He wanted to take over Kohen Gadol, become Kohen Gadol. The Zohar Kodesh says that the Sfidos, Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes, the three top Sfidos of the seven. Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes. Chesed is right, Gevura is left, Tiferes is center. Chesed is Avraham, Gevura is Yitzchak Avinu, Tiferes is Yaakov Avinu. That's how it starts. Later we also have these same three applied to Chesed is Kohen, Levi is Gevura, and Tiferes, the center, both is Yisrael, right in the center. So therefore we see that Chesed, or right, the right is the Kohen. The left is the Levi, Din. To want to transpose these two, to switch Levi for Kohen, that means he's switching the wrong side, right to left, left to right. That's why he was switched. That's why we have the person who is left-handed. It's a sign that he did wrong between the right and the left. What was the wrong? Kaidach's act was Machlekes. The word Machlekes is synonymous with Kaidach. The posek of Bnei Kaidach Lo Mesu. Children of Kaidach did not die. In this story with Kaidach, what does that teach us? That in all generations, the children of Kaidach, which means the descendants of Kaidach, the act of Kaidach remains alive. Whenever you find a Machlekes in any generation, it's because this is a descendant of Kaidach. It comes from the symbol of Kaidach. So we see that Machlekes goes together, is reflected in the switching of right and left. This is only a hint to show, Beggars are bringing out the point, that a person who's a Baal Machlekes, when it causes Machlekes, he will have this trouble, that the right and left will be switched. His left hand will become his right hand. One who is left-handed, when we speak about the left-handed person's hands, we call his right hand what is normally a person's left. That is called his right hand, his superior hand. So we see a complete switch between right and left, and that shows that it is Machlekes. The second case, too, that is brought, the second to them is a hint to, is the fact that, as I mentioned, the posek tells us about the tribe of Binyamin during the Civil War. When there was a war between the 11 tribes and the one tribe, Binyamin, we find that Binyamin had 700 left-handed sharpshooters. 700 left-handed sharpshooters. Why go into this whole story? The Torah should tell us a story about these 700 left-handed sharpshooters. They were left-handed, repeat a few times. Why tell us something like that? How does it relate to the story? Why is that so relevant? And it says we can see from here, again this fact, again hinting to us, teaching us this hidden fact. Ben Yamin. Yamin is right. Right what happened? They went out and caused a civil war. They caused machlekes. Because of that, the stress is put that their best men were now itiriyad. They were now left. They switched left-handed, right-handed to left-handed because of the fact they caused machlekes and Muhammad. So this again is a sign proving what the Arizal's point is. Arizal also said once in the Sefer Hamidas, another statement. This, of course, too, obviously is so. Here we say that this Sicha, the Arizal said that a person who was a Baal Machlekes, when he is reborn, he comes into the world, he's reborn as a left-handed person. The Sefer Hamidas says, too, that a person who was a liar in the last Gilgul, when he's reborn as a left-handed person. Both of these are so. So a person who is left-handed means that it's not proof, of course, that he was one of those two. But it certainly is much more probable that he was either one of those two or very possibly both. What is important now? A person is told that he is a liar, corrected. A person is told he's Malachlekas, corrected. But why tell him that he was one in the last Gilgul? What's so important about his knowing that? The answer is that, naturally, the Gemara says, Avuch b'may zoyet. When you ask a person, what mitzvah does your father take very particular care in? Each one, the Gemara, the rabbis rest, they said, my father thinking about this mitzvah, that mitzvah. What is meant by that? Arizal says, Moshe Kodesh says that this means that your father, meaning, what mitzvah do you take care of? What mitzvah are you particular about? Because you are great enough to know your former Gilgul. Which mitzvah is it you came back to this world, reborn again, to complete that which you failed to complete the last Gilgul? And these tzaddikim knew about it. They said, I missed a certain mitzvah, and therefore in this world I'm very particular about completing that mitzvah. And that's for the very great tzaddikim to know. An ordinary person could not tell what happened in his former Gilgul. But in this case, though, the Arizal reveals it is possible for an ordinary person to, a regular layman, to know that these two items are so serious. Number one, machlekes, that's above all else. One who causes machlekes could destroy the chance for parnasa, could destroy the chance for harmony, could destroy the chance of Mashiach's coming. The whole problem with Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim was because of machlekes, inner machlekes. Arizal's success was that there was peace and harmony among them. Or a person who, chas v'shalom, speaks sheker, he's removing the seal of Hashem, chas v'shalom. So a person who is left-handed should know that very possibly he was plagued with these two things. So at least these two, he should be very careful to correct or to see to it that he avoids going back into this pitfall. In that way, if this is a sign, most probably, if he is in that category, most probably, if he did come back to this world because of those two shortcomings, at least he'll know that he has perfected it. He does not repeat the same error as in the last Gilgul. This is the purpose, the time, when the Arizal revealed this, and how beneficial it is to know. Because it's noteworthy, too, that in past generations there never was so large a number of left-handed people. It's only recently we find more and more of them. You ask any sefer who writes tefillin, those who make tefillin, I'll tell you that the last generation there were much less left-handed tefillin than there is this generation. 2 generations back, still less. That's how the generations proceed and decline. Therefore, we know that the midah of emes is so vital, especially now, when the sheker is so spread over the world. We have to see to preserve it, to guard it. We should be zecher, all of us, to watch our tongues and our actions, to speak only the emes, which is the chesed of kedusha, the name of Hashem, and to see that we keep the shalom among ourselves. This shalom will spread to shalom on Yisrael. At Tzchus, we should be zecher to see the coming of Mashiach Tikuney, Vinyan Beis HaMikdash, Simcha Cholius, Leiv Yomei.